Welcome to VB Coding. You can call me B. In today's video, we are going to cover how to connect to SQL Server through your VBA code. We will go over how to do this using a SQL login with the credentials using a username and password, or if the SQL login is using Windows authentication, then we will use the trusted_connection. We will cover both pulling data from and pushing data to your SQL Server from your Excel workbook, and also cover security, such as creating a specific service account for this process, as opposed to using a individual's credentials. We will limit the service account's access, and also password protect our VBA coding. While writing your VBA code, to establish a connection to SQL Server, first we need to define our variables. Dim means dimension. So we are creating our variable con as object. Con is short for connection. RS as object. RS is our record set. And our variable SQL or SQL as a string. You don't need to use the same variable names, but these are just commonly used. Set your connection as a new ADODB connection, and then you are going to open that connection and provide this full string. Say that the driver is SQL Server. Enter the server name, your username, password, and the database name. This full string is surrounded by quotation marks at the front and at the end. Make sure that you have no spaces while writing out the string. For example, you don't want to have a space after the semicolons or between the equal signs. If you are not using a username and password and using Windows authentication, then replace username and password with this trusted_connection equals yes. Next, if you are pulling data from SQL Server into your Excel workbook, then we will say our SQL variable, the full string, is going to be our query. So we can do select star from our table name. Feel free to adjust this as you would like. If you want to pull in just certain tables, add a where clause, whatever you would normally query in Management Studio. Then we want to execute that query using our connection. And for our example, I already have the column headers and column in row 1. So I'm going to say, starting at row 2, I want to have our loop start filling in column by column the records from SQL Server. So this is just saying, in our sheets here, we're calling it data. In the Excel tab called data, on the current row, in column 1 or column A, I want the value to be the row, the record set, 0 value. So when pulling data from SQL Server, the first column, the count starts at 0. So we're going from 0, 1, 2, repeat on until you have all of the columns that you want to pull. Then, after you have all of the columns from the first row in SQL Server, we want to move the record set to the next record, move next. In our Excel workbook, we are going to say the current row, take that current row plus 1 to move on to the next row. And we are going to keep looping until we reach the end of file of our query after our loop goes through until it reaches all of the rows, all of the records within our query. It'll end, and after it finishes, we want to close our connections just to wrap it up with a pretty bow. We don't need to have the connection active anymore. If you are pushing data to SQL Server, we'll start off the same way as if we were pulling data. We need to define our variables, our connection, record set, SQL, crow, which is what we are just calling our current row. Also define the variables for your individual columns. So I'm just saying here, like our variable name A, string, variable B is as string. You'll want the variable to match the data type that is in SQL Server. So if you had a whole number, then define the variable as an integer. If you have a number with a decimal place, then use variant. If it's a date, use a date, etc. Define your connection again. We're doing the same thing, the connection or con.open, and this section with the driver. This is that full string we saw before where you defined saying that you're connected to SQL Server, give the username, password, server name, database name. And then we are going to make a loop. So starting at row 2, because row 1 is where our headers are, row 2 is where the actual data starts. We are going to say keep looping in our Excel workbook until column A equals nothing. Those are just two quotation marks side by side. There's no space in the middle. And then you say the value that we are going to put into the SQL column 1 is going to be from this Excel sheet, whatever current row we are on, column 1, take the value that's in that cell. And you keep building for each of those variables, all of the variables that are going to fill in the SQL columns. Now that you have those variables, now we can write our SQL code. So we can say SQL or SQL equals quotation marks, insert into the table that you want to populate, specify the columns, and you can continue building off this one row, but to make it easier to read, I have broken it up here. So below that, I have SQL equals SQL and add in the values. And this is just taking the value, the string that we gave it before, this insert into. We're going to take that full string and then just keep adding to it. So that way you can keep building your query line by line versus having one row with everything on it, just to make it easier to read. So we are now going to put in our variable names. And whenever you need to put in a variable, use the quotation marks ampersand at the front, and then to close it off, ampersand quotation marks, and continue as if you were writing the query in SQL Server, so still using the apostrophes, comma, etc. After you have your SQL script written, you can, while you're writing your project, do debug.print SQL. So then in the immediate window, you can see what that query looks like. But after you're done writing your project, you can comment out this section because you won't need it anymore. And plus, you don't want that to continue to build every time the macros run. You are going to now execute that SQL script. And then after that has been run, the SQL table will have been updated. Then in your macro, you're going to say the current row equals current row plus 1 to move on to the next row. the loop will bring it back up to the top of your do until, run again, and the loop will keep running until our current row, column A, has no value. And then our script will stop running. So creating a Surface account, the premise behind this is you don't want to use credentials of an individual person. And for more than one reason. If the person were to leave the company and their credentials were deactivated, then the macro will no longer work. Also, if this workbook is going to be saved to multiple people or shared out to a team, well, now whatever credentials that you use will not be as secure. Though granted, I am going to show you how to password protect your VBA workbook, but using a Surface account to connect to your SQL Server, you can give it just read-only access or just select access to the tables or views it needs. You can give it the update, delete, insert into permissions as well to specific tables. So basically, just for this workbook, only give the account only what it needs to do its job and nothing more. We have gone over how to create a Surface account in a previous video, but we'll quickly go through it here as well. So again, after you create the login, here's where you would grant either select access or grant update, insert, delete access to that Surface account to specific tables. And also to protect the VBA coding, you can password protect it. So even if somebody knew how to open up the developer tab or how to unhide the developer tab, go to the Visual Basic window to see the coding inside, if it was not password protected, then they could see the server name, the database name, the username, the password. They could see all of those credentials. So we can password protect our VBA coding so they do not have that access. Though granted, if you used a Surface account anyway that had very limited access, then the danger is lower, but always be safe, always practice data security. And with that, let's hop over to our workbook. I've started off with already creating our Excel workbook. The file type is macro enabled. Make sure that your workbook is macro enabled and not saved as like a normal Excel workbook, or the macro coding cannot run. I've already created 2 tabs, Asset Data and Asset Submit. Our project today is going to be tracking our fixed assets for a few locations. The first tab will be pulling data from SQL Server. The second tab, we will be pushing the data to SQL Server. Also, as a prereq, in our database, I have already created the assets table. And I've also created a work table that we will be pushing data to. And the only difference between the work table and the original table is that this original table, I have the asset number auto incrementing by 1. For a work table, I like to have it less strict, so it's more friendly to work with initially, so it is not auto incrementing the asset number. Currently there is no data inside. I'm going to just very quickly go over how to insert data. this is the data I'm going to be importing. So I'm going to leave the asset number as blank because when I import this data, the auto increment is going to populate that for me. I have our different locations that you've probably recognized from other videos. I want to work with different types of data that I think you'll be encountering. So we have a string. We have this asset ID. Even though it's a number, I'm going to treat it as a string so I don't lose the leading zeros. And plus, when working with these, quote unquote numbers, like I wouldn't be adding these, I wouldn't be doing any kind of math because these are IDs for the location. I have more strings where you have decimals or decimal places for numbers, and a dates column. So if you are following along, feel free to pause, copy this down. And here, I'll move over to the right as well. In 1, 2, 3. If you want to pause here, continue to copy this down. But I am going to close this, go back to our SQL Server, right-click the server name, go to tasks, and my share is cutting it off. Let's see if I can test. Still too low. I'm just going to tasks and then import data. It's at the bottom here. My screen recording is cutting it off. You open the import wizard, go to next. The data source is going to be Excel. So what I've noticed is, at least for SQL Express on my computer, I have trouble importing data from Excel as just like a normal generic workbook. So I saved the workbook as the Microsoft Excel 97 to 2003. So likewise, when I am importing this workbook, I'm also making sure the Excel version says 97 to 2003. Hit next. For the destination, I'm doing SQL Server. That's my server name. If you have not created a login, but you just downloaded SQL Express to your computer, to your Windows machine, then you already have Windows authentication. It'll work. But if you do have credentials, then you can type that in here. Make sure the database name is accurate. Next. So because I am importing from Excel, I can just keep the first item checked. Hit next. I'm copying over from my data tab. And if you have a lot of tables in your server, it is helpful to just copy the name and paste. Or if it's being silly because I'm recording, I can either type in the name and notice how the icon changed from like a gray table to now this like blue header table. Or if you don't have many tables, you can use the drop down and select on your assets. Before hitting next, always click in that row and review the mappings. Make sure everything is maps. We have our asset number. And honestly, I'm going to let the auto increment work, so I'll just say ignore for that one. Location ID, everything is good. In our Excel workbook, I had the name last updated, but the table or the column name is timestamp. So they don't have to match perfectly. If you understand, these are actually the same thing. So I can change that, hit OK, hit next. You can just hit next, run immediately, next. Pause here to review, make sure you're using the right Excel workbook you intended to import. It's going to the correct table. It's going to an existing table. Such as if I had a typo in the table name, but also did not review the mappings, then this can also hint to me, hey, you're going to make a new table versus import into an existing one. Finish. And close. Oops, I accidentally hit new query instead of execute. Let me close that. Execute. And now our auto incrementing integer column populated this for us. We have our location ID. We were able to keep the zeros. Got our description. Dollar amounts. Save the decimal places. Everything looks good. And our timestamp. So now that we have all of our prereqs ready to go, now we can start coding in VBA. Oh, but also one more thing. If you do not have the developer tab showing in your ribbon, then go to File, Options, and in the pop-up window, you'll want to go to Customize Ribbon and check the box for the developer tab. And so for me to open up, to get to this window here, all I did was go to Developer and click on Visual Basic. And then you'll have this window open. So right now, our goal is to get the data that we just imported from the assets table and pull it into our assets data tab in Excel. So in Visual Basic, I am going to insert module, because modules is where your coding is going to reside. I can rename this module by going to Properties, and I can say A_ whole data. And I can also go ahead and create a new module and rename this B push data. So using the ABCD can keep your modules in order. Making sure I am in our pull data. Start off our VBA coding with sub, assets, pull data. The end sub appears on its own. We need to define our variables. So let's do dim for dimension, con as objects, our connection, rs or record set as objects, SQL as string, and make our current row variable as integer because you cannot have a row 2.5. They are always whole numbers. To make comments in VBA, do 1 apostrophe, and then you can start typing. So I can now say crow equals current row. Comments will turn green. When we are pulling data from SQL Server, we want the data to start populating row 2. So I'm going to say current row equals 2. Set our connection. Set con equals new ADODB connection. There is one more thing you do need to do for this to work, and that is to go to Tools, References, And I'm just going to copy my notes here. So you want to go to Tools, References, and check the box for Microsoft ActiveX Data Object 6.1 library, or when you're stepping through your coding, it is going to fail here. I will not do it yet because I want to show you what it looks like. So there are two different ways that you can, or a couple different ways that you can connect to your SQL Server, either using a username and password or Windows authentication using a trusted connection. So real quick, I want to make a Surface account. So within our server, I'm going to go down to Security, Logins, make a new login. I'm going to move it up here so you can see. I'm going to call it SVC, short for Surface Account, Assets Macro. This way with the SVC, I know it's not a actual person, it's a Surface account. I know the purpose is for this Assets Macro. I want it to use a SQL Server username and password. So you can use a password generator. For example, like this NordPass allows you to specify the password length. You can say if you want to include uppercase, lowercase, use numbers, symbols, or avoid ambiguous characters. And that'll be like avoid using the letter O and number 0, because depending on the fonts, those can be hard to distinguish. So I can say I want my password length to be 15 characters long, include all of these parameters, and it'll spit out a password. Or you can keep clicking this refresh if you don't like one. So I'm keeping a quick note. Up here is just the prereqs for getting this workbook started. But going down here, for our Assets Macro Surface accounts, I can use this password. And then for when we want to password protect our VBA coding, I can hit this again. And we will use this one later on. But for now, let's save this. Paste it into our passwords. For server roles, I'll just keep as public. I want to have access to just one of our databases, keep as public. For securables, search. And I'm going to select on our SQL Express. And down below, look for Connect SQL, grant it. Now in status, I'm just making sure permission is granted, login is enabled, and okay. But at this time, the login has been created, but they don't have access to do anything. So now that we've created the Surface account login, now I can grant it access. I want to grant it select access on the table called Assets. Here, let me phrase that again. I'm granting only select on the table called Assets to the Surface account. For our work table, where we actually want to insert data into it, I can grant it more permissions. So here I can say I want to grant select, update, insert, delete on the work table assets to that Surface account. So I can highlight and execute. So before moving on, we can test these credentials out. So down in our toolbar, we can actually open up a second window by right-clicking on the Management Studio icon in our taskbar, not toolbar. Right-click it and then click on the SQL Server Management Studio again to make a second window. So here I can connect to our SQL Express using our new SVC assets macro with the password. So logging in as this Surface account, we can review what it has access to. So if I go to expand on the dev database, we get this database is not accessible. Okay, so I can go to prod, expand on tables. So already you can compare our other login, how we can see all of the tables. And to go back to this new Surface account, it can only see those two tables. I can do select star from assets. But now what if I try to do anything like delete data? To be safe, always surrounds these kinds of these kinds of commands with begin tran, rollback, commit, in case something goes awry. Delete from assets. The delete permission was denied on the object assets on that database with schema DBO. So proving that we only have select access and we are not able to do anything else that was not granted to us. And just for funsies, I'll just roll that back, even though nothing was done. So now that we have our Surface account created, we can create our connection. So I'm going to say con open, and now quotation marks, driver equals, and then we're not doing like the solid bracket, we're doing like the squiggly bracket, SQL Server, colon. For the server name, you're going to grab it from here. So my server name is this coffee / SQL Express. SQL Express. Semicolon. My user ID is going to be that Surface account, SVC, assets, macro, colon, PWD, or password is that password that we generated before. Semicolon, database equals, the database name is this VB tutorials _ prod. And then the end quotation marks. So you only have quotation marks at the very front and at the very end. We have no spaces after the semicolons, no spaces around the equal signs. So if you were not using a username and password, here I can comment this out by adding a single apostrophe at the start. Then I would take out username and password, backspace, and replace it with trusted _ connection equals yes. Let's do a quick test. I'm going to press F8 on my keyboard. And sometimes if you're working like on a laptop, you might have to press the FN key or hold down FN while pressing F8. So immediately, as soon as I pressed F8, I got this error message. I got a compile error, user defined type not defined. I'll just hit OK. Yeah, and even though I tried to continue on pressing F8 again, it just won't let me. So to stop it from running, I'll hit this square to reset it. So now let's actually go back and go to Tools, References. Tools, References. And I want to scroll down to Microsoft Active X Data Objects 6.1 Library. Check the box, hit OK. So now if I hit F8, 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 now it's going to let me work through. And it gave me no errors when using that trusted connection. I can comment that out, do the same thing, but with our username and password to make sure that is good to go. F8, F8, F8. No errors. So let's write our SQL query. So we are going to do SQL or SQL equals quotation marks, select star from VBA assets and quotation marks, set rs equals, using our connection, we're going to execute that SQL. So as a quick note, before I bring data into my assets data tab, what if there's already information in there? I don't want to muddy this up because let's say I had 17 rows, 17 records in here, 18 rows because of the header. But then the next time I run my macro, what if the new query had just a few results? Well, then all these rows at the top will be updated, but then you have old data at the bottom, and things get muddy. So let's remove what is out there first. You can do this by making sure you're on the correct sheets. Sheets, asset data, range, A2 to I2 dot select. And I'm doing A2 to I2 because that's A2 obviously being the start, and I is the last column that would have data. So if you only had columns up to D, then I would have said A2 to D2. And then take that selection dot end XL down. So that's just doing the Control Shift down to highlight everything. And then of that selection, clear contents. And I personally like to just go back to the very top, so I'll just say select A2 again. Okay, so we have our query ready to go. We have cleared asset data. So now it is ready to receive information. I'll just say do. And again, being extra safe, to say the sheet name I want this information to go to. Sheets, asset data, cells, current row, the current row that we are on. In column 1 or column A, I want that value to equal the record set from our SQL query of 0. Because remember, the count will start at 0 and then go 1, 2, 3, 4. Repeat again for sheets, asset data, cells, current row. Now column 2 or column B, I want that value to be the record set of 1, and so on. And I keep building this out for all of the columns in my tab. I'm not going to write this all out. I have already prepared this ahead of time. If you have extra tabs that you don't want in there, and you don't want to keep pressing backspace to fix everything, you can highlight and do Shift Tab, and it'll move everything over. Then at the bottom, we'll say move on to the next record set. We also want to do the current row in Excel that we are on. Take that current row and do current row +1 to move on. And then we want our loop to continue until we are at the end of file, the end of our query. And then at the very bottom, we can do some cleanup where we can close the RS, close the connection, set the connection to nothing, and also don't forget to save your workbook. Active workbook.save. Always save. So looking again, we have 12 records we are expecting to pull into our workbook. So go over here, pressing F8, 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 F8 again and again. This is where if we had data, it would clear it out. It is filling in all of the tabs for us. Now, it is going to move on to the next record in here. So the first one was for Sarah Serpents for an office computer. The second record should be Sarah Serpents for a sliding door enclosure. There we go. And if this is running for a while, if you ever want to double check, like, okay, what row is it? What row does it think the current row is on? And so just if you're really manipulating the current row numbers, you can just hover your mouse over any variable to see what does the code think the current value is. You can also do this with debug print. And we'll be using debug print later on too. So no worries. If it looks like the data is populating just fine on its own, I don't need to keep pressing F8. I can just press the green continue button or play button at the top, and it'll run on its own. And now we have all 12 rows. So we saw that when we first pulled in the data, even though our record or our location IDs, they have the leading zeros, they should be treated as string. In my Excel tab, I had not yet changed the data type here to text. So when they came over, I only saw 1, 2, 3. I did not see the leading zeros. So I changed the data type to text, and then the next time I ran the macro, the zeros came in that way. Next, we'll be going over how to push data from our Excel workbook to SQL Server. In this case, we are going to be using our Asset Submit tab. And let me save and close. I want to make sure now I'm in my second module for push data. So to start off our coding, type in sub push data, opening closing parentheses. The end sub appears on its own. You can copy from the first tab this top part with the connection, the RS SQL Crow, paste it in your push data module. But now I need to create variables for the different columns that I'm going to be populating in our working table. And you might be confused, okay, what is a working table? So we have our core assets table. This is like our golden copy. This is our official copy. If we want to make changes to this assets table, or maybe add records, we want to update records to be inactive. Before we touch the golden copy, it is nice to first put that information in a working table so you can first review the data, make sure it looks accurate. You can test your update, insert scripts by joining your asset table to the working table. Just make sure you're updating only what you expect to update, you're inserting only what you expect to insert. It's just a nice side table. So now, going back in here, I'm not going to type all of this one by one, but just see that I am creating a asset number, location ID. I'm creating all of these variables. I'm using the same data type. So asset number is an integer, Remember when we made our working table in SQL, asset number is an integer, location is a string, location ID, even though technically, yes, it's a number, I'm treating it as a string. The amount in SQL, this will be decimal. In VBA, you use variant. Everything else, string, date. I am leading all these variable names with E. So then when I'm reading through the code later on, E means Excel. So I know the value for this variable is coming from Excel. But you do not have to do that. That's just what I do. We need to establish our connection. Again, we can just copy from our hole. Because we already wrote that out using our Surface account with its 15-character password. When pushing the data, we are going to push data starting at row 2 because row 1 is just a header, so you don't need the headers. So I'm going to say current row is 2. Our do until loop is going to say the cell that we are currently on the current row in column 1, column A, that value equals nothing. These are just 2 pairs of quotation marks, no spaces is in between them. So now I can say where the E asset number, we created the variable itself, but now we need to give it a value. So I'm saying that E asset number value is going to come from the asset submit tab from cells, whatever current row that we're on, column 1 dot value. And then repeat for all of the others. And we are going to run into a little bit of a sticky situation when it comes to the location because of the apostrophe. If we were to bring this over to SQL, it'll think that apostrophe is the end of that string. But just for fun, I am going to let it break so you can see what that looks like. And then I'll show you how to fix it. So now that all of our variables have a value, we can write our SQL script. It'll be insert into DBO working assets, and then list off all of the column names. There's quotation marks at the start, and I realize I'm in the way. There are quotation marks at the start and quotation marks at the end. Going to the next row, I'm going to continue building off of that same variable. So SQL equals SQL ampersand, quotation marks, values, do parentheses. And this part can get confusing, but just take it slow. So I'm going to do open parentheses, apostrophe, quotation marks, ampersand, our E asset number, ampersand, quotation marks, and then our apostrophe, comma, apostrophe, quotation marks again, and continue building. So the gist of it is your variables are going to be in between apostrophes, but because we are going to be using VBA variables, you're pretty much having to squeak in quotation marks and ampersands before and after your variables. So this can get a little tricky, but just take it slow, and it'll be fine. It's not difficult, it's just if you accidentally forget an ampersand or change the order of the quotation marks and apostrophes at the wrong time, it just won't work. Before you execute your query, we can review how it looks by using debug.print space SQL. So to view what the debug print does, go to View, Immediate Window, and now you get this white box at the bottom. So now if I press F8, I need to finish my loop. Let me do that really quick. Set. Actually. Set rs equals con. We'll be executing that SQL. And then at the end, we need to move on to our next row. So doing current row equals current row plus 1. Loop. Okay, so now our loop ends our do until, so now I can do F8. F8. Oh. Let me just copy this. There we go. I forgot to do our set connection as a new AD-ODB connection. Okay. So we don't have any information on this tab currently, but I am just seeing for now. Here's our insert into, working assets, all the columns, and all of our values surrounded by apostrophes. So I'm actually going to hit the stop button at the top to stop it from running, because we need to populate it. So let's say we have, let's copy this one. So we have one existing asset. The condition we previously said was fair, but we wanted to replace it soon. Well, now it is the time. So I'm going to make the asset flag I for inactive. And you can make this more fancy. We can make this a drop down to be like AID for active, inactive, disposed. Last updated 2025. And we are keeping that asset number. Let's say we got a new asset for location 001. So they got a new tablet. This tablet is $350.21. It's a new tablet, so it's active. New. Use the same date, that's fine. Let's say the location Harry's Hogs, they wanted another. I missed putting an S for glass, but that's okay. I will fix it for this one. Put in the price. It's active, it's new. There we go. Okay, so now we have information to work with. I can go down to our immediate window and, you know, every time this runs, this can grow and grow and grow. So if you want to, you can just highlight backspace. Like, this is just for your reference. So pressing F8, F8, F8. I accidentally had column 8 in here twice. So that is why I got that oh, I'm glad I got the error. I'm glad that they were two different data types. Building our SQL. Debug.print. So going down to our immediate window, let's see how this looks. Insert into our working table for assets, specifying all the columns. And then we say what the values will be. Sarah Serpents. We have the full location ID, that's 001 instead of the 001 instead of just the 1. And it looks good. So I can execute. Oh, see, this is where we're going to run into the issue because of that apostrophe. So see, when I hit F8 here on execute, we got this incorrect syntax near S. So while debugging, I can copy this string that I was trying to pass to our SQL Server. And now from here, we can see how does this look. So going down, Control V to paste. And now we can scroll through, insert into yada yada. It looks fine. It's pretty. Going down to values and whoop, there it is. There's the issue. So it thinks that this apostrophe is the end of that string. And now it's kind of throwing everything else off. So, as a workaround, I can go back up to where we defined our location, and I can replace within the eLocation variable an apostrophe with this note of char or car 39. This is character. So, what is this? This is taking reference from ASCII. So here, if I just go to Google, we'll just... So basically, characters have their own ID. Let's see. Yes, I like this table a lot. So from here, we can see an apostrophe, its ID is 39. So when we go to work in SQL Server, we can use this in its place if we really do want an apostrophe to be within that string. And we do have a full video just on these codes and how to work with them. So making sure our query is definitely stopped, cleared out our immediate window. We can do F8, F8, F8. And actually, let me backtrack. Again, if you want to backtrack in VBA, left click on the yellow arrow, not error, and you can drag it up or down to where you want it to be. So I can drag it up, press F8 to re-execute that. And this might be hard to see on the recording, but it shows Sarah's Serpents right now with the apostrophe S. But now if I press F8 again to execute this replace, that apostrophe S was replaced with this plus sign car 39. Okay. Debug. This is going to look weird. Oh, let me go back out. This is going to look weird initially, but no worries. Trust. We can execute. And one more thing. So I want to actually change my do until loop to reference column 2, because if I have a new asset coming in, they don't have an ID yet within our system. So when I originally said do until the current row in column A was blank, well, it grabbed the first one, ignored the others, and the loop ended. So I changed the do until loop to look at column 2, the location. When that is blank, then the loop can stop. Right now, if I take a look at our work table, we can see it came through. And we are actually going to replace this piece very soon. For a clean start, I'm going to truncate our working table, confirming it is blank. So going back, making sure I'm saving my work, pressing F8, F8 again and again. And honestly, I feel good about the SQL scripts, so I can do a single apostrophe at the start of the debug.print to make it green. Now it is a comment, so will not execute. So it'll no longer populate this immediate window and I can close it. Oh, and also workbook.save. Always save your work. And I can either keep pressing F8 or I can press the play button. Going back in Management Studio, I see all of the information now, and it looks good. Okay, but what about that strange char 39 that came over from Excel to SQL Server? Let's clean this up so we can do, or get rid of this. Begin tran, rollback, commit. When doing updates, deletes, any kind of changes, always surround your code with begin tran, rollback, commit. Updates. Our working table of assets. We want to set our location as still as a location. We're still keeping that part, but we are just replacing that previous text that we put in with actually using char 39. Because for now, it came over as a string in and of itself, but now we want to actually use it as the true ASCII code, if that makes sense. Before hitting commit, always review the changes. Check for typos. Oh, in this example, I did not include spaces. So just be safe, I can roll back. If I roll back again, it just says, hey, there's no open transaction. I just like to do that to make sure, for absolute certain, nothing's hanging out there. Okay, so now, execute. And now we have our apostrophes officially in our SQL table. After we review, I see that looks good. Now we're going to highlight commit and execute. And I can execute again, just to be extra sure there's no open transactions. So from here, whoever is the admin, now they can write additional scripts to insert into assets from the work table assets. They can make updates referencing the work table. But at least from here, we are all set, good to go. So while your admin might have multiple scripts for updating records versus inserting new records, here's one example where from our work table, we see we have 2 new IDs or 2 new assets that need to be added to our asset table. So our admin can go in and say insert into assets, the location, through timestamp. I am excluding asset number because the assets table will have the asset number auto incrementing. So that'll be filled in for us automatically. Those fields will be populated by the location through timestamp columns from the working table of assets, WK_assets. We gave it an alias of B. You don't have to do that. But we also need to make sure we are inserting new records just for what is new, so we don't duplicate anything. So I'll say where asset number in our working table is equal to 0. So now if I highlight from begin tran to the end, execute, we see 2 rows were affected. Before I commit, I'm going to review the assets table and look at the bottom. We have the 2 new assets. And the count does not show 13 and 14 because I just did a quick test earlier. And there you go. And after the admin has done what they needed to do with all of the assets in the working table, everything has been addressed. They can truncate the work table and move on, whatever their official process is. But now that the assets table has been updated, we can go back to our polling scripts and make sure I save. And back to our poll. We can do F8, F8. Remember, we are currently down. We are currently down to row 13. It cleared the old information. And honestly, I'll just hit the press or play button. Now we're down to row 15. So we are all done and good to go, but we want to make sure if somebody understood how to show the developer tab and go to Visual Basic, we don't want them to be able to come in here and see the full credentials, the server name, database name, username, and password. So we are going to go up to Tools, go to VBA Project Properties, go to the Protection tab, check the box for Lock Project for Viewing, and give it a password. And remember, at the start of this recording, we already generated a 15-character password with uppercase, lowercase, symbols, numbers. So I'm going to copy that and paste. So now let's open up this workbook. Fresh. So when you open up a VBA, a macro-enabled workbook, you do need to select on Enable Content or else the coding will not be able to run. Go to Developer and go to Visual Basic. So notice that we cannot see the modules at all. We already need to type in the password. And now you can get in, make your edits. So this is nice where we not only have a service account that has access to just the tables it needs, and not only just the tables it needs, but has limited access of only select or maybe some update, delete, etc. It has a 15-character password with capital letters, lowercase, symbols, numbers. We have also password protected our VBA coding, so nobody can grab all of those credentials. So just to keep in mind that when working with a workbook that has a connection directly to your data source, just always enforce security. So all in all, when it comes to security, just remember that using the credentials of an individual who brings in the risk of them leaving the company, credentials are turned off, and they break the project.
That's a paddlin.
If you are not password protecting your VBA coding to hide all of the credentials, which include the server name, the database name, username, and password.
That's a paddlin.
And not only all of that, but a admin using their own credentials for a project like this, in which they have probably access to everything, and the workbook is later on shared to a wider audience.
Oh, you better believe that's a paddlin.
Hello. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a scenario in mind, feel free to email me at askvbcoding@gmail.com and I'll consider them for future videos. I really appreciate your time and thank you again for watching. Have an awesome night. Goodbye.